Welcome. If you're watching online, we want to say we're so happy that you're with us. Winchester, it's great to be together again, and we're in for a really good day. We're in for a treat with Chad being with us. I want to take a moment and talk about him and honor him and introduce him, and then we're going to watch a short video that he's going to speak off of that describes some of what he's been doing over the past few months, which is just absolutely incredible. But Chad Robichaux is a former Force Recon Marine who served 8 deployments in Afghanistan, and as a part of a Joint Special Ops Task Force, Joint Special Ops Command Task Force. Am I getting it right, Chad? And served our nation just in an amazing way. And then after his time in the military, he became a professional MMA fighter. So don't mess with him because he literally will take you down. But fought professionally in MMA. But then what he has become known and loved for at this church is then he planted and launched what is known as the Mighty Oaks Foundation, serving our nation's veterans. And just out of his story, which you'll hear bits and pieces of today, but out of his story and what God did in his life, he's made a commitment, he and Kathy, to give their lives for those that have served our nation, specifically those suffering with PTSD. And so over 4,000 active military and military veterans have gone through the Mighty Oaks program. And what the impact of this program, they have 4 ranches across the United States. One of the locations is right here, and our church serves at that location as these veterans go through this program and get ministered to and ultimately find Jesus, but get healed from the effects and the things that they're carrying from their time, giving their life for this nation. But we've been able to see up close the impact that the Mighty Oaks Foundation has had, and it's really hard words fall short in describing the impact of this program on so many men and women and marriages and families and children as they've come alongside these veterans and ministered to them with giving them the ultimate answer, which is Jesus, but coming alongside of them. Chad has spoken to over 250,000 troops. He's advised our former presidential administration, Congress, DOD, in veteran affairs, in this whole faith-based treatment of PTSD. And so Chad's just an absolutely incredible man, and you could talk about him and what he's done forever. But that's a little bit about him. He's written 6 books. He's writing more. He's writing like a book a year. He's a best-selling author. We've actually got a couple of his books in the lobby today, and you can order them online. But The Unfair Advantage, and Unfair Advantage is his story and what God has done in his life. That'll be available today. We've got a devotional that he wrote called Behind the Lines. They have a marriage book coming out in February, which, by the way, it's already on pre-sale, so you can go on Amazon, search his name, and you can go ahead and pre-order that book. But he's an author. He's done all these incredible things. I mean, he's a bad man. But I just want to say this before we honor him is I just want to say that he's also been just an incredible friend to my family. He's been an incredible friend of this church, and we truly do consider Chad and Kathy family. And so the relationship that God has built in my family and his family has just been amazing. He's one of the most humble people that you'll ever meet. One of the most integrous men that you'll ever meet, consistent and faithful. It's not about him, doesn't like the spotlight, but I think that's why God has shown the spotlight on him and is using him in such a magnificent way. We are truly honored, Love Church, whether you're watching online in Winchester or here in the room, we're truly honored to have him. And so I'm not bringing him on the stage yet. We're going to open with a video that's going to set up his message that's talking about what he's done. So I want to do this, though. In Winchester, here in the room, I want to just take a moment and put our hands together and give honor where honor is due, and put our hands together for Chad and his wife, Kathy. Thank you so much for being here today. We love you. We're honored to have you. We're excited to hear you speak. Come on, yes, stand to your feet and show them honor, show them love today. We love you, we honor you, and we welcome you here to Love Church today. Let's turn our attention to the screen.
It's a task force of the willing, and it's a task force of all volunteers.
I just felt like I had to go.
They said, hey, can you help us out? We need some political connections here for this thing. We're gonna go and save orphans. And I'm like, man, I'll do that in a heartbeat.
I wanted to do something, I didn't know what to do.
And we said, hey, we have the means, we have the ability, we have the passion, we have the know-how to do this. Let's just press forward and do it.
There's over 3,500 kids in Afghanistan that are trapped and need to get out. I have a plan to get them all out in the next 96 hours. Can you come help me? And I was like, all right. This challenge in particular was a little bit different, given the circumstances of Kabul.
The technical and tactical tradecraft and skills that combined collectively ended up being the perfect team to do this mission of getting people out.
Everything just kind of came together with that kind of experience hitting the ground at the same time.
Kabul during the largest evacuation in its history, while the Taliban is coming to kill everyone trying to get out, this is a different level of non-permissive.
And within a period of a few days, we had about 15,000, I'm probably underestimating, emails come in, messages come in with people saying they needed help.
I haven't been on the ground 15 minutes, and I'm walking to Taliban-held territory trying to ID their checkpoints so we can figure out our rat lines past them.
And if you have the ability to help someone, then you have to.
The only necessary thing for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. There's still a lot of people on the ground that need to get out. There's nobody coming to help them. Well, that's a problem.
We have to structure multiple nonprofit organizations under a group, a coalition effort that we're calling Save Our Allies.
You know, sometimes you just have to say, like, who else is going to do it? I was either going to be sitting on my couch or I was going to be one of the 12 people that was making it a little more American.
If you have that thing in you that is calling you to action, don't ignore it, you're going to regret it. Do something about it, but you got to do it now. Go do something.
Thank you guys. Good morning, church. Well, I can't help but watch that video and think of what Pastor David would think, how proud he would be that Mighty Oaks was involved in that. And then I'm also sitting here this morning just thinking how proud Pastor David would be of you, Josh, and Brittany. And the Beard family and all of you guys. You know, I knew Pastor David so well, and I know how proud he would be of all you guys and what you're doing and the legacy building. I'm just looking at the video thinking, wow, man, he would be so excited. I could just see it. But, you know, this video, what it really captured was, you know, I'm just a proud representative to get to talk about so many people that were involved in that. Different organizations, from Glenn Beck's organization, Mercury One, that raised $26 million to pay. They paid for most of our flights. And, you know, people in this church that support us. So many people got behind us at one time. The men and women that were represented in that video, their initial 12 guys. I know we had a family member of Joe Robert with us today. And so many people were just involved in pulling that together. Mighty Oaks came together with an organization called the Independence Fund, which is out here out of Virginia. A really lifelong friend of mine, Dan Stinson. We all came together to start the Save Our Allies Coalition, which formed in its own nonprofit. And as we all came together to do this, one thing we all had in common was this theme to go forth and do this thing that God was burdening our hearts to do, which is to help people that couldn't help themselves. We seen a problem. We knew the governments of the world were not stepping up. And if you paid attention in there, there was a scripture, Isaiah 6:8. It says, then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And then I said, here am I, send me. That was the one thing in common that all of us had, was this burden in our heart to say, hey, no one's going to do this. I'm gonna go help these people. And so we called it Task Force 6-8, under that calling from Isaiah 6-8. Now, I'm sure everyone in their life has had a time where you felt stirred or burdened to do something profound for God and to help others. But when you get excited about it, but when you really think about it and think it through, then the insecurities come in. You think how unqualified and inadequate you are, maybe because of your past experiences, your past failures or lack of experiences, or just fear of feeling unqualified or inadequate, the insecurities that come in. Has anybody ever felt that way? Yeah, me too. Me too, especially the last few months. The things that we accomplished in Afghanistan over the past few months were in fact incredible, and something that we're very proud of. But the truth is, the things that happened in a divine way. It was in a divine nature that were far beyond mine or our team's abilities to pull off. I can't even explain how some of the things miraculously came together, how some of the things were orchestrated. You know, entitling this message today, I thought the best title was The Warrior Within, because the warrior within, to me, is the Spirit of God that's in us. It's the Spirit of God that burdens us, that stirs up those emotions and feelings, those callings to go and do something like this, but also gives us the courage and most importantly equips us to do the things that God calls us to do. So today I don't want to tell you guys a story about this crazy thing, you know, my friends and I did in Afghanistan. What I want to tell you about is our weaknesses, our inadequacies, and why someone like me should never have been part of something like that, but how God used us anyway. In the Bible, in 2 Corinthians 11:30, it says, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. Right? Why is that? Because if we're able to do things on our own, then we get the credit. But the things of God are not meant to be done on our own. The things of God are meant to be done in a way that we should be able to boast about them, but we boast about them through our weaknesses so that God will get the credit. And in this case, he certainly does. So why would I, with my background, feel inadequate to do something like we did in Afghanistan? I mean, the truth is I have a tremendous amount of experience. I started training for the military when I was 13 years old. I had a lifelong goal to go into special operations. I went in the Marine Corps when I was 17. I made it to Recon, to Force Recon, made it over to JSOC on that task force, did 8 deployments as an AFO in Afghanistan. I'm using a lot of acronyms you may not know, but I got to do a lot of cool stuff in the military. I was in the military for almost 10 years before Afghanistan, so I got to do all the training in schools, and you know, I was a military free-fall parachutist. I was a combat scuba diver, all the advanced special operations schools that you could go to. I've been to them all. I was extremely qualified, and I got to serve with some of the most incredible people. So I had all this experience, and I'd done it before. You know, why would I feel insecure about going back to Afghanistan? Well, if some of you know my story, it's because of my history. I came home from my 8th and last deployment, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. I dealt with anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, debilitating panic attacks to the point to where I literally would feel like I was going to die. You know, I dealt with all those things, and even beyond my redemption through finding my faith in Christ, even beyond that redemption and starting Mighty Oaks, I still dealt with anxiety and at times depression because of that past experience. There were times, even after starting Mighty Oaks, that I would have such bad panic attacks. Two times I found myself in the emergency room with blood pressure 200 over 130. That's stroke level, right? And I'm a healthy guy. Like, I work out every day. I still train jiu-jitsu every day. I eat really well. And so my blood pressure being high, that's all based on stress and anxiety, these panic attacks. There was moments to where I felt like if I got in a car and drove to the gas station by myself, like I would have a panic attack and die if I was by myself. Like, I dealt with this through the years. I dealt with it in a way that I didn't before my relationship with Christ, but I still dealt with those things. In fact, Pastor Beard came out. He actually left you guys one time because I was struggling so bad, and he flew out to my home and stayed with me to help me through it. And so these are times that I was really struggled. So to go back to Afghanistan and deal with these physiological effects were something that made me doubt my ability. You know, God's burdened in my heart to go help these people, but I have this history. Can I go back and do this? And then I really thought, for the last 10 years, I've been going and speaking to the active duty military about the pillars of resiliency: mind, body, spirit, and social. In fact, Pastor Josh was saying earlier, I spoke to 250,000 active duty troops in the last 2 years, 250,000 troops on the pillars of resiliency. How to be mentally tough, physically tough, how to have a social network, a good social network, a good team to surround yourself by, and a strong spiritual pillar, a strong spiritual foundation. Those 4 things. And I told them the story about how when I went to Afghanistan before, during those 8 times, how I had a really strong body. I was in really good shape. I had a really strong mind. Socially, I was surrounded by all the best people, but I didn't have that spiritual pillar. And because of that, it almost cost me everything. It almost destroyed me. And I tell them that if they would have that spiritual pillar, if they'd have that relationship with Christ, that they wouldn't experience the things that I experienced. That they'd be able to go into the hardships of battle and come back, not only be able to do their job well, but come back and be able to rebound from those hardships. And I really believe that. I wasn't selling them a bill of goods. Like, I really believe that. And I was been saying that for the last 10 years. But now, here I am again in a place I never thought I'd be again, getting called, which I believe by God, to go back to Afghanistan. And now I get a chance to not talk about this, but actually for the first time practically live out these 4 pillars of resiliency. And that, I think, was what gave me the faith in God to move forward. Now, how did I get started with this going? People would say, how do you get started to go? A lot of people went to help in Afghanistan. For me, it was my interpreter, Aziz. If you read some of my books, in fact, the book that Pastor Josh have up here, his name's Bashir in the book because I was protecting his identity. But Aziz was not only my interpreter, but he was my friend. He was my teammate. The 2 of us would go all over the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I wasn't just working with him as an interpreter on my team. Like, he was my team. It was the 2 of us. And I can tell you, like, he would never let me walk around the corner in a Taliban village first. Like, he was always the first one to go because he wanted to protect me. And we went, when we were not out operating, we were at his home. I didn't go leave him and go back to base. I was at his home and eating dinner with his family and playing with his kids and nephews. And I love this guy. I mean, he saved my life literally on 3 times. And I've seen him save the lives of other service members, rescue operations he's done. I mean, this guy's like an American hero and never even been to America. He's an amazing human being. And when I saw the withdrawal happening in Afghanistan, I said, man, I cannot leave my friend Aziz, his wife, and 6 kids there. I have to go get my friend. And we had already been trying 6 years of getting his visa process. It just wasn't working. So myself and my friend Dan Stinson, we decided we devised a plan of how we were going to go get Aziz. And we started putting a team together. And as we were putting this team together, one of our other team members, you've seen that video, recognized that there were some other people that needed help too, not just Aziz and his family, a lot of people. One group in particular was 3,500 orphan kids. And we said, hey, if we're going to go do this, let's help as many people as we can. We have the skills, we have the experience, we have the know-how, we have the ability and passion to do it. Let's help as many people as we can. And so we decided we were going to help go out and get as many American citizens as we could, interpreters and their families, women that would be vulnerable to the Taliban, children that would be vulnerable, they couldn't protect themselves, and Christians that would be persecuted for their faith. Those are the groups that we were going to go after. And we went to the United Arab Emirates, the country, and we presented our plan to them. This is what we're going to do. This is who we are. This is the experience we have. One of our team members had a personal relationship there with the family. And as we presented this plan, they said yes, they would help us. They gave us a lot of support. They gave us 2 C-17 planes, 2 big military planes, an airstrip. They gave us access to the humanitarian center, a runway to leave from, a place to set our operations center up. And then we started going into Afghanistan to help people. We coordinated with the U.S. military who had control of the Kabul airport. And we didn't know how much time that we would have. We just started working 24/7. As every hour of the day, literally, we worked. And we ended up having 10 days. And after we got Aziz and his family out, because we got them out, we ended up getting them out first. When that 10 days settled, we ended up getting 12,000 people out. We had no idea how many. We got them all to the Abu Dhabi Humanitarian Center, and we realized as the U.S. military left that the problem had not been solved. In fact, we were more determined than ever to continue helping because we knew American citizens were still there. You know, the news was saying there was 100 to 200, and I'll tell you firsthand, I won't get into the politics of it, but I'll tell you there were probably thousands still there for sure, that was my estimation for being on the ground. But the truth is, it didn't matter if there was even one. We had to do the right thing and go get them. But we don't leave Americans behind. And so we're determined to do that. And then our interpreters, we had a moral obligation. We believed we had a moral obligation to do the right thing by interpreters that fought for us for the last 20 years to go in and get them and their families. So we want to continue with that. And we want to continue helping getting these vulnerable groups out. So we made a commitment to do that. Since then, we've been flying people out of remote parts of Afghanistan. We've got another 3,000 people out. And as we were watching this happen, we knew that the ability to fly people out might kind of dry up. So we decided we wanted to make sure we had routes to get people out on foot across border. And if you could imagine, if you're an Afghan family, you lost your home, you lost everything. You're living out in a safe house or out in the mountains somewhere, and you want to move your family across the border to flee Afghanistan. You're going blind. You don't know what you're going to run into. I mean, the mountain terrain there is crazy, like 25,000-foot cliffs. You would be maybe traveling over a week through a valley. It would be treacherous, the obstacles you'd run into. And then you get to that valley, into that valley, you get to the border, and maybe there's a couple 100-foot cliff or a Category 5 river, and you can't cross. Now you have to go back. Or you run into a Taliban checkpoint or a Chinese checkpoint. You no telling what you're going to run into. So they were going blind, and we knew we had to give them the critical data to be able to safely cross, because they had, Afghan commandos that wanted to help them cross. And so we decided to do what's some border reconnaissance, which is kind of my old job, and I knew how to do that well. And there was two of us that we felt that were qualified to do it. Myself and a guy named Dennis. Dennis is still serving as a 4th Recon Marine. He's about 15 years younger than me, so he's like me, 15 years younger, a lot healthier. And the two of us were the two guys that was going to do this. And we decided to go in to a border region, I won't say the country we went to, and across in Afghanistan and build routes to get these people out. And so as we started planning this and flying there, it's a long flight, probably about over 40 hours to get to this country. And so as you're flying, there's a lot of time to think. And while my mind's thinking, I'm thinking, man, the Kabul airport was one thing, but this is something altogether different. I'm going to be going in the middle of the mountains with a guy I never worked with before. I trust him, but I never worked with him before. We're going to be, there's going to be foreign intelligence agencies all over. We're not going to be welcome there. And we're going to swim across the river in Afghanistan by ourselves to build routes out. To be honest with you, I got a little excited. It had been a while since I did this. I was a little excited to go do it again. But also, the self-doubt starts creeping in. And I'm thinking, man, am I biting off more than I could chew? Am I going to get in the middle of these mountains and have a panic attack? I don't know how my body's physiologically going to react again. Am I going to put my teammate in danger? What happens if my blood pressure gets 200 over 130? Like, all those things started spinning through my mind. And then I had to pause for a second and remember, God called me to do this. I believe that God burdened my heart to go help these people. And I just had this conversation with God on that plane. God, if you're calling me to do this, I need you to equip me to do this by taking away any fear, any anxiety, any physiological effects. Equip me to be able to do this work that you called me to do. And I felt a peace. And then we landed. We had one layover before we went in. And Dennis, my partner Dennis, is a fellow believer. And we got together and we prayed together. God, give us the ability to do this. Give us the wisdom to make good decisions. Give us the courage to do this. Take away any fear, anxiety. Equip us to do what you're calling us to do. We prayed together, and then we got on that plane and we flew into that country and went in and did it. And while we were there, to give you an idea of the environment, we didn't anticipate this, but they were Chinese military, and I don't mean like Chinese security guards. I mean like legitimate, like Chinese snipers and special operations, military everywhere. There are Russian soldiers everywhere. There was another country military that I won't say who they were. The Taliban on the other side of that river, Taliban was everywhere. It was a very hostile environment. We couldn't use our electronics because they were trying to intercept our signal to locate us. So we had to shut off our electronics. There was just two of us out there by ourselves for 10 days. And in that period of time, we gathered 90 miles of border. We did 90 miles of border reconnaissance and identified 6 crossings for people to cross. And we would cross the river at night to gather all the information to be able to provide to these people. I mean, where to go, where to cross, where places to hide would be, where are the bad guys, how fast is the water, how cold the water is, how deep the water is, all the different aspects, the information that they would need. We're gathering all that information, and it was, again, a very hostile environment. Hours, almost a day in the middle of nowhere. One of the crossing points, to give you an idea of how the situation was, one of the crossing points that we had, about 100 yards to the east of us was a Taliban checkpoint with 3 Taliban soldiers on the top with AK-47s. And about 300 yards to the west of us was a Chinese mechanized vehicle, a BMP, with a PKM machine gun on top and a giant spotlight just for people crossing the river. And crossing right between those spots. It was, having to find the perfect spots was very difficult and very, very risky. And I remember, like, before we left on one of those crossings, I was late. I went by myself in the mountains. If anybody follows me on Instagram, you would have seen this. I didn't say where it was or what I was doing. I just prayed. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me on the right path for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil because he is with me. Right? He prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. He anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely his goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. I pray that prayer almost every day. It calms me, it relaxes me, it focuses me. And in that moment, it really relaxed me. I felt calm and be able to regather myself on what I was about to do and to cross those rivers. And I just felt the peace that it's really hard to even explain here today. We had one more crossing that we were going to do, and we crossed that river with a really, really great man from Afghanistan. And while we were crossing, we were in Afghanistan, and there was two times there was a motorcycle drive-by with 2 guys on it, and the Afghan we were with was like, those are Taliban scouts, and we were like 30 yards away. I remember asking myself, like, why do I feel like so calm? Like, am I being complacent? Like, why do I feel so calm? But then I also asked myself, God, what the heck are you having me out here doing? I'm 46 years old and I'm running a ministry. Like, what am I out here doing? But I couldn't answer that question of why I felt so calm or why God would have me out there in that moment. And while we were successful, again, I couldn't answer that question. But 4 days later, I was scheduled to be at MCRD San Diego, Marine Corps Boot Camp. And even though I was coming back from this long trip, we literally stayed awake 23 hours per day for like 7 days of that and didn't sleep much other time. So we were awake all that time. And I just had to go. I couldn't cancel on these. I mean, 7 years I've been going to Marine Corps Boot Camp every quarter and speaking to these Marines. I couldn't cancel on them. I had to go. And I think that's where I was able to answer the question of why I was in that river. Because I'm sitting in front of 3,000 of these Marine Corps recruits. And while I'm sitting in front of them, I'm telling them the 4 pillars of resiliency. And I didn't plan on telling them this story, but I did. I told them about the time that I was in Afghanistan, those 8 times before. And I had a strong mind. I had a strong body. And I had a really good team, but I didn't have the spiritual resiliency. And it almost cost me everything. But this time, maybe my mind's not quite what it used to be. And my body certainly isn't. About 3 days before I left for Afghanistan, I actually snapped my groin muscle off the bone training jiu-jitsu. You guys know I train jiu-jitsu. I remember the doctor saying, the next morning I got an MRI, and the doctor said, you need emergency surgery. And I was like, well, I'm leaving to Afghanistan. And he's like, yeah, but you need emergency surgery. And so I asked a few questions. I said, one, if I just so happen to have to run to or from something, like, will I fall down? Like, will I be a liability to my friends? And he said, no, because you have 4 other muscles. And I'm like, okay, well, he said it hurt really bad, and I was okay with it hurting. But he said, and I said, will it make it worse? And he's like, well, it's detached. It can't be any worse, right? So I went. Obviously, I went anyway, and I never got the surgery. But I'm sitting in front of these recruits saying, hey, my mind's not what it used to be. My body's not what it used to be. I'm broken right now. And I love Dennis, but it was just the 2 of us on that team. But the one thing that I had was the one thing I needed, and that was that spiritual resiliency, that relationship with Christ. And for the first time in 10 years, I was able to sit in front of them and not tell it in theory, but from a practical experience. And I don't know if that's why God had me there, but I believe it was one of those reasons, and I'm certainly going to lean on that as I speak to these warriors in the way forward. Look, we all have times in our life where we believe that God is calling us to do something, but because of our past, because of our experiences, we feel unqualified or inadequate. It doesn't have to be Afghanistan, right? There's a million things it could be. It could be parenting, right? You feel like, man, I don't have what it takes to be the father or mother that I need to be. It could be in relationships with a friend, with a family member, with a spouse, where you just feel like you just can't do it anymore. You can't be the husband, the wife, the friend that you need to be, the parent that you need to be because of different failures or inadequacies. It could be service. You could feel called to do service to this church or your community, but because of your past, you feel like you're not qualified to do it. I mean, I was watching a legacy video and thinking, there's some people that probably feel burdened to be stretched to participate in something like that. It could be so many things that you feel God's burdened you to do, but you don't feel like you have what it takes to do it. A lack of obedience to God or simply not acting is typically based out of fear. And one of the things about the Bible is it says this: do not fear, or in one form or another is mentioned in the Bible 365 times, right? One for every day of the year. Do not fear, right? And the fear that we experience comes from putting our trust in the wrong places, mainly ourselves. When we attempt to trust ourselves, fear and doubt always sets in. Why? Because we know ourselves, right? We know how flawed we are. We know our strengths, but we also know our weaknesses. We know what we're capable of, but we also know what we're not capable of on our own. But God knows those things too. He knows them better than we know ourselves. He knows our strengths. He knows our weaknesses. He knows what we're capable of. The Bible says in Luke 12:7 that he actually knows the numbers of hairs on our head. That means a lot to me because that means he has to be constantly present with me because over the last few years, the numbers of hairs on my head tend to change pretty rapidly by the minute. So, God knows us. He knows what we can and cannot do on our own, but he calls us anyway. And so there's three things that I think to respond to that is number one, we have to have faith in God. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, for we walk by faith and not by sight. If we look at big obstacles and big goals, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming for us. In cases like what we just did in Afghanistan, it would be a lot overwhelming for us to see, hey, we're going to go to Afghanistan and rescue 15,000 people. Me and my friend are going to go in the middle of the mountains and swim in Afghanistan in the middle of the night to build route. That's overwhelming. We try to handle that burden by looking at it and thinking how I could accomplish that. It'll crush us. It'll bring anxiety and stress on us. Trust me, that's been a big part of my life, trying to carry that myself, carry things that we're not meant to carry. So we need to look at things by faith and not by sight. When we look at them by faith, God will do the rest. Number two, we have to be obedient when he calls us, right? We have to be obedient when he calls us. If you believe that God is calling you to do something, you have to say yes. You have to say yes. You have to believe that he is calling. If you believe he's calling you, you have to say yes. Right? 1 Thessalonians 5:24 says, he who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. If he calls you to do it and you're obedient, he's going to equip you to do it. He's going to get it done. It may not look the way you want it to look or the way you anticipate it to look, but his will be done. Number three, and this one's important, is a really important one for me. Don't compare. Don't compare. Galatians 6:4 says, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. Great quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It says, comparison is a thief of joy. If you compare what you do to what other people do, it will steal the joy right out of it. The thing we did in Afghanistan was a big thing. But the thing itself doesn't matter. The size of the thing doesn't matter. What matters is being obedient to what God is calling you to do and what God equips you to do. That's what matters. Trust me, I'd be much more scared of going work the children's ministry than going back to Afghanistan. Because I'm equipped to do Afghanistan. God didn't just call me to go to Afghanistan. He equipped me to do it. I had the experience to do it. There's a lot of things that I'm not equipped to do. A lot of things I'm not good at. If you don't believe me, just ask my wife, Kathy. She's here. She'll give you a list of the things I'm not good at, right? God doesn't care about worldly accolades or measures of success. We all get caught up into this. I'm the worst. I'm a competitor by nature. Everything in life is a competition to me. And I want to do the best I can at it, even like something like preparing for a message, a study. I try to do it, and even in ministry, like I'm tracking stats and goals and milestones. And it's okay to be driven. It's okay to want to do things right. But the truth is, what God cares about is us being obedient to him. That's what he cares about. He cares about us trusting him and having faith to trust him. And he cares about us glorifying him when the victory comes. That's what matters. And as it turns out, the Bible is full of characters just like you and me. In fact, the heroes of the faith were men and women that faced moments where they were either scared or felt unqualified to do what God was calling them to do. But at some point, they simply made a decision to say yes. One of those people is a man named Gideon. Now, after the Israelites entered the promised land, the Midianites heavily oppressed them for about 10 years. They would pillage their homes, they would kill them, they would destroy their crops, they would kill their livestock. So the people began to hide. Some of them lived in caves, and a lot of them began to turn away from God because they felt God had abandoned them. Now, when there's times of oppression like this, God will always call a warrior up to stand and fight and see his plan through. God, throughout history, God has always done this, but it's not always the model warrior that you would expect. I mean, King David did not slay Goliath. The little shepherd boy, David, slayed Goliath. If you watch that video that we just played, there was a lot of gray hairs in that video. Most of us in our 40s, a couple of guys in their 50s. My buddy Dan, he's pushing 60. Right? There was a lot of, we wasn't quite the A team. But God uses unexpected people to rise up. And in this case, God calls a guy named Gideon. Now, the odds were stacked against Gideon because Gideon was the weakest member of his family from the weakest tribe in Israel. And he was scared. We know he was scared because when the Bible introduces him, he's hiding in a wine press, sifting out wheat. Now, I never sifted out wheat before, but what I'm told is that if you beat out the wheat, you're separating the wheat from the chaff, you do it out in the open. So the breeze will come through and blow that chaff away, and you're left with the wheat. He was hiding in a wine press doing this, right? In Judges 6:12, it introduces Gideon. It says, the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, and he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Pardon me, my Lord, Gideon said, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that the ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hands. Am I not sending you? Pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. And the Lord answered him, I will be with you and will strike down the Midianites, leaving none alive. Right? So Gideon's literally arguing with God saying, like, who, me? Like, you must have came to the wrong address. Like, I'm not your guy. I'm not qualified. I'm not strong enough. Yet God said, am I not sending you? Am I not sending you? God used the unexpected to do the unimaginable. He often does. In my life, in your life, God can and will use us, the unexpected, to do the unimaginable. Gideon decided to say yes to God, but God didn't tell him how to do it, so he did it the only way he knew how. He went and get as many of his friends as possible. The Bible doesn't say how long it took him, but he gathered up 32,000 of his friends to go and face 135,000 Midianite fighters. Now, by the way, it's not the Mennonites. Those are the good guys. The Midianites. Those are the bad guys. This is 4-1 odds. 32,000 versus 135,000. Not very formidable odds. You know what God told Gideon? You gathered too many people, right? And Gideon's like, how can I gather too many people? We're already outnumbered 4-1. But God didn't want anyone to question his victory, right? With a large force of 32,000, maybe Gideon was a good strategist. Maybe he got lucky, right? Maybe the circumstances, the odds could have been in his favor. Not good odds, but not impossible. God didn't want any question. I mean, like the 12 of us in Afghanistan, look, God could have used the United States military to do it. They probably would have done it better than us. But I couldn't have came up here and told you that there was no one to give credit to besides God. And that's what God wanted in this story. That's what God wanted in this story. God told Gideon, send home any of those fighters who are scared. And apparently a lot of them were scared because 22,000 of them went home. Gideon was only left with 10,000. And now he's outnumbered 14-1. You know what God told him? Still have too many. Right? And can you imagine what Gideon was thinking? Can you imagine? Right? What in the world, God? You asked me to do this impossible mission that I'm not qualified for. I already told you that I'm the least qualified, And then I go out and raise up the best group of people I can find to fight them, and you dismantle it. God sent Gideon down to the river to select the final men. And what God told Gideon was, separate those who lap water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. And so 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping water like dogs. And the other 9,700 got on their knees and stuck their face in the water and drank the water. Now, I'm a military strategist, so I think about this story from that perspective. And I think the 300 men that drank from cupped hands, they were lapping like dogs. They could still look around and be alert. But the 9,700, they got on their knees and stuck their face in the water. Those weren't very alert fighters. And so God said to send them home. And now Gideon's left with only 300. And God instructed Gideon that time had come to go into battle. But you know, God, just like I was on that plane flying there, questioning myself, God knows our hearts and he knows our fears, including Gideon's fear that he only had 300 men to fight the 135,000 man army that had been oppressing them for 10 years. The same army that had his family hiding in caves. The same army that led him to be sifting out that wheat in that wine press. I mean, he's seen the oppression. He was probably scared, and he probably doubted. He had faith, but these are some pretty big odds. The Bible says the enemy was so numerous that they were as thick as locusts. It said you could no more count them than you count the sand on a seashore. God knew Gideon was facing fear. So God told him, Gideon, if you're afraid to attack, I want you to take your servant and sneak into the Midianite camp and listen to what they're saying. And after you hear what they're saying, you're going to have the confidence to go and attack. And so Gideon did that. Him and his servant snuck into the Midianite camp, and they listened to these men talking. And one of them told the other, I had a dream that God gave Gideon victory over us. And when Gideon heard that, it was exactly what he needed to hear. He knelt down and he worshiped God, and he went back to his 300 men, and he told them, get up. The Lord has just given the Midianites in our hands. And the Bible says that Gideon and his 300 men snuck into the Midianite camp in the cover of darkness. They surrounded them, and when Gideon sounded the attack, they came in to attack the Midianites, screaming for the Lord and for Gideon. And when that happened, the Midianites panicked, and they started to kill everyone they saw. But in the darkness and their confusion, they were killing themselves. They were killing their own army. And Gideon and his men went in and mopped up the remainder, killing the rest of them, including the 2 kings who Gideon killed himself. Gideon's obedience is what gave God the victory for the Israelites, and was able to free the Israelites, free God's people to give them back the promised land that God had promised them. Gideon trusted God even though he faced an impossible mission that he felt unqualified for. And we even see his confidence build as God cuts his army by 99% from 32,000 to 300. And just like the 12 of us, God was able to show that true victory comes from his hands and not ours. Gideon, as we read in there, Gideon was not qualified. He was the least qualified. Last month in Afghanistan, in my own self-doubt, I thought, God, there has to be a better choice. And I'm sure at points in your life, you thought the same thing about yourselves. God, there has to be a better person. There has to be someone more qualified. I'll leave this to someone else to do. Someone else, you'll use someone else instead of me. But Gideon had one thing in his control. He had a choice. I had a choice. And you have a choice. We could simply choose, as Gideon did, to say yes to God, to disregard our fears and our inadequacies, and simply be obedient to the things that God's burdening our heart to do. We won't know how it's going to turn out. We don't get that. We don't get the ending. We just need to be obedient. Look, I didn't know how Afghanistan was going to turn out, to be honest with you. I kind of lied to Kathy because I'm like, it's going to be fine. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if we were going to be allowed to get into the country. I didn't know if I was going to save Aziz. I had no idea. I didn't know if we were going to get killed or captured ourselves. I had no idea. And thankfully, we were successful. And I'm home safe, and all my friends are safe, and we were able to help a lot of people. But the story of Gideon, and while it was also a victory, Gideon didn't know what the results was going to be. The truth is, many followers of Christ have faced hardships and even died doing exactly what God called them to do. That's the truth. Look at the apostles. But that isn't the point. The point isn't personal victory or our safety. That's not the point at all. The point is our obedience. In the big picture for God, that's where the victory comes from, right? Can you imagine if we all lived this way? If we all trusted God enough and had enough faith in God to just let him work in our lives. As I was preparing this message, it really convicted me because I was thinking, what if I had that same faith that I had with Afghanistan in every area of my life? What would my life look like? You know, this today isn't about Afghanistan. It's some operation in Afghanistan. And it's not about you accomplishing your goals in life or accomplishing things in ministry. It's not about you. It's about saying yes to God and letting him use us to change the world and put a spotlight on him for everyone to see. If we could all get that, what would our homes look like? What would your relationships look like? What would our communities look like? What would this church look like? For God's sakes, what would our country look like if we would just let God work in our lives? The truth is we can do that. If we'll simply disregard our fears, reject our past and our inadequacies, and lean forward into things that God burdens our heart for. The Apostle Paul got this when he said in Philippians 3:13-4, he said, "Brothers, I do not consider that I made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind me, right, and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on towards the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." Right? What he's saying here is, I don't have it all figured out, but one thing I know is this: I will not let my past hold me back from the work that God has me to do. Right? What's holding you back? What's holding us back? Let it go and say yes. Say yes to the things of God so that he can do through you only the things that he can do. Right, can we pray? Lord, I thank you for this church. I thank you for Pastor Josh. Lord, I just pray your hand be over him as he takes on this burden of carrying this church forward and continue on the legacy that Pastor David left behind. Lord, I thank you that you didn't just create us, Lord, but you created us for a purpose and to fulfill your will and fulfill the things that you want to do in this world, Lord. You use us, you equip us, you call us, you burden our hearts to help people that can't help themselves, to do things that others can't do, Lord, to reach people, to do just incredible things, Lord. You burden our hearts to do those things, but you don't just burden us, Lord, you equip us. I pray that we can see that, Lord, and that we can have that seeing that and trusting that will give us the faith we need to say yes to you, to say yes to the things you call us to do, Lord. And we're able to be part of your mission in this world, to reach the ends of the earth for the kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.
Come on, can you put your hands together for an incredible message? Thank you so much, Chad.
So much for hanging out with us today. Hey, if you're new to Love Church or if you made a decision to follow Jesus today, you might very well be wondering, what now? Well, I've got some things to help you figure out what's next. You can go ahead and check those out by clicking the What Now link in the description below. If you've been blessed by this ministry, we would love your support through giving. You can do that by clicking the link in the description or by texting your amount to 84321. And finally, if you want to stay up to date with Love Church and everything that's going on here, remember to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like our Facebook page. And hey, before you go, I wanted to say it was so great seeing you today, and I want you to know you are loved, and we're thankful for getting to spend some time with you. Well, I hope you have a great week, and I can't wait to see you next Sunday.